Can I say a huge welcome and good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for the Drawing Projects UK drawing discussion this afternoon. The drawing discussions are a series of programmes alongside the Trinity Buoy Wharf Drawing Prize 2020, and they're supported by Arts Council England. And we're really thrilled this afternoon to welcome Sophia Yadong Hao, who's the Principal Curator of the Cooper Gallery at Duncan of Jordenston College of Art and Design at the University of Dundee. For those of you who haven't met me before, I'm Anita Taylor. I'm the Director of the Trinity Buoy Wharf Drawing Prize. I'm also the founder of Drawing Projects UK, and I'm the Dean at Duncan of Jordenston College of Art and Design at the University of Dundee. So we're welcoming you to the baton handing moment of the Drawing Prize on its way to Cooper Gallery as the next venue on its tour. But we're really thrilled that Sophia was a selector for the Trinity Buoy Wharf Drawing Prize 2020, along with Ian McKeever, the artist, and Francis Morris, director of Tate Modern. So we're really thrilled to welcome Sophia this afternoon. The format of the session is that I'm going to unshare my screen in a moment, and Sophia will share hers to present, and then we'll swap over again for a Q&A session. So please feel free to pop Q&As or questions that we can answer in the Q&A function. You'll find the button there. We'll also keep an eye on the chat in case anybody pops one in there. But we have Fiona Cassidy with us this afternoon, who is managing the questions and keeping an eye in the background. And it should be a very straightforward afternoon of discussion, and it will be really interesting to hear from Sophia. So I'm going to hand over to Sophia now. So I'm going to unshare my screen and Sophia will share hers. Thank you.
And thanks, Anita. I'm thrilled to be invited to join this discussion event at Drawing Projects UK, although only virtually. And it's very exciting. And now we're setting up the stage for the Trinity Buoy Wharf Drawing Prize to come to Dundee. And I'm sure there will be a lot of exciting events also happening in Dundee as well. I've been paying a close attention to what's going on at the Drawing Projects UK, and really inspiring discussions and a lot of interesting responses on social media from audiences as well. And so I've been thinking about this notion and practice of drawing, and made some notes around discourses of drawing I would like to share with you. So I've made some slides as well. So I will share my screen first. And the title of this set of notes called "It is a Manner of Drawing." So the quintessential manner or signature of drawing resides in memory, time, and duration. As a practice, drawing documents gives witness to and provides testimony of what transpired. With this understanding in mind, I wish to mark down a brief history which positions drawing as a live and a performative practice concerned with and bound by the urgencies of the experiential and the embodied subject. So following this sketch, I will talk without the burdens of marking any conclusions on the selection of contemporary drawing works by artists with whom Cooper Gallery has worked and those shortlisted in this year's Drawing Prize. So the first line of this art history is a myth of drawing and representation. The tale of a young woman who drew a charcoal line round the shadow cast by the man she loved before he went to war. This act of drawing, of tracing a line, desires an escape, a line of flight from the mortal human condition towards something other. For R.B. Warburg, this other was memory, developing drawing as a practice of visual citation and quotation. Warburg assembled collections of images featuring mythological beings, classical architecture, and the mundane into startling collages, which he named after the Greek goddess of memory. But this wasn't memory as a truthful account. Warburg's drawings, attentive to the discursive play between thought and found image, sought no physical likeness of the world. They are instead a play of visual association, juxtaposing and interrupting time and the gaze, a space of trance and duration, in which the ephemeral and the passing suggest a concrete world. Inhabiting and defining duration as a space and public act, Chinese artist He Chengyao's performance inside 1.58 square meters also takes a line for a walk. Lasting 4 hours, this work document gives witness to and acts as a testimony to what happened. But the what happened is not only the marble floor, the tapes, and a repetitive, deliberate moment. What is testified to by this drawing is the critical materiality of the embodied subject. He Chengyao doesn't draw, but draws upon how we identify and see the trace and passage of the living before, around, and behind us. With an equal focus and reference on the immediacy and the liveness of drawing is a piece by Jade Montserrat, No Need for Clothing. Speaking of entanglement and commodity fetishism, her performance adopts time and duration as a cogent means to draw attention to the conflicts between histories of colonialism and today's reality. As the title indicates, No Need for Clothing examines the naked body as a critically infused visual language. So the correlate to the body is the architecture space within which we appear and trace our own very particular passage. Paying attention to this tension, the politics of small places brought together Turner Prize-nominated artist Paul Noble's unsettling depiction of urban blight with the 19th century pioneering Scottish urban planner Patrick Geddes at a critical moment in Dundee's cultural history, the opening of the V&A Dundee in 2017. So juxtaposing Noble's Nest, which portrays a deserted urban environment of egg carton buildings, with Geddes' technical drawings and diagrams on urban planning and civic politics. The politics of small places posits drawing as a thinking machine, capable of asking urgent questions on sustainability, social struggle, and collective effort. So these examples from Cooper Gallery's program delineate for me the outlines of a drawing practice that takes issue with how the body and the place bear the mark of politics. So participating in the selection process for the Trinity Buoy Wharf Drawing Prize reiterated this perspective. Every work I saw attested and bore witness to a moment of becoming that was incomplete and passive. And it is this performativity, the inscription of a moment in time in all its perceptual complexity and depth, which defines drawing as a concrete presence of another. So each drawing seen in the selection process was a glimpse of other spaces, of worlds traversed by technologies, techniques, and radical ways of saying and being. So from too many examples, Circling the Square by Aisha Zohar captured the subtle interplay between body, space, and technology. While the Geraldine's Southern Trains transforms a fleeting moment of reflections in glass into a meditative spectacle. Extraordinary and lucid, each work in the exhibition elaborates new worlds, such as Isabel Rock's Grief 1, Leap from the Island, where strangeness is the principle, or lays bare the shared intimacy of consciousness negotiating the world. In Tricia Gelman's Moments 3, Beneath the Skin, where language emerges and dissolves, always vulnerable to memory. Yet drawing is not always a solitary process, as Anne Laurent, You Are It demonstrates. Participatory and live, the manner of this drawing action evokes questions of authorship, of collectivity. So collaboration comes to the fore also in Sean Bowen and Simone Granell's Firefly Baskets Telly, a work which evolved through exchange and reflective responses. So drawing as a shared and shareable medium is developed in Wang Rantan's Digital Habitat, a virtual space. This immersive drawing returns the architectural space of a community to life, expanding what was past back into now. So yet it is with these details that a drawing conducts a conversation with the lived and experiential. Chris Bruce's Island People pencils such a dialogue. On the cusp of visibility and legibility, the eye discovers on this island a profound and productive otherness, a suggested place where who, and importantly how we are, is a matter of perspective and judgment. Nina Child's marker 170 embodies this questioning praxis of drawing, featuring a single excessive mark that saturates the paper. This crumbled drawn sculpture, like so many in the final selection of the drawing prize, slips in and out of legibility, skirting the gaps and the voids where easy meanings and statements of value once held sway. So it is in this private life of the drawing, which diverts the gaze from visual stereotypes to an ambiguous and unsettled space of becoming, that the full scope of what drawing as a practice offers is most readily and urgently present. This subtle interiority of drawing, renegotiating appearance and value, contests and challenges language, not simply in terms of how drawing can be described or as here talked about, but in how we designate states and indeed preciousness to artworks in general. Thank you very much. That's just a very short set of notes.
Thank you, Sophia. That's really fantastic as an introduction to the sense of your perspectives on drawing, your experience of curating drawing in the Cooper Gallery, and actually really exciting to see some of those examples there before my time, but also to have that selection and very perspicacious view through some of the works that are selected. So really terrific. I'm going to share just the Q&A session, just so that people are aware quite where we are and what we're doing at this point in time, should they join at this moment. That's all good.
Yeah, okay.
Be there. So I think, you know, that was a really concise and actually very dense in terms of there being a really amazing amount of information to distill and to think about. And I'm really struck by the sense of something that you have as a continuous preoccupation in a way about that state of unbecoming or the state of becoming.
Yeah.
And I wonder if you might want to say a little bit more about that in the context of being a selector and the show, and how you how the work resonated with you.
Yeah, it is a very, I was going to say it was, but we're still in this very particular moment in time, or in, our lived experience. So it was quite a specific context within which I think all these artists submitted works and worked on their submission to the drawing prize, and within which all the selectors and with yourself, Anita, how we navigated through different conditions and practical limitations to select those works. And as far as I know, and this year's submission, you had the largest number in the drawing prize history, and we had over 4,000 entrants. So that was quite a startling experience for me to go through all these works. But I think if I could, I think I've already mentioned and all these really key kind of impression or a memory I had through this selection was this sense of the desire for the tangible world, and also the desire to be with others, and the hope as well, not only grief, but the hope as well. And I've been thinking about this, it's one of the feminist kind of spirits or concepts, and this idea of becoming, so everything's in flux, and how you experience that fleeting moment, and how you articulate it as well, rather than represent it in a most kind of a stereotypical way. And I think that's something really left with me after the selection, having seen all the works, and both the works being shortlisted and also even those works hadn't been shortlisted. But this whole sense of trying to grasp that moment fleeting by. But also because becoming is one of the key inspiration for my own practice as a curator, and that I think actually has come through many projects we have presented as Cooper Gallery's work, and all these artists we featured in our program as well. I think that really speaks a lot about open-endedness and giving space to others as well. So all these keywords in terms of discursiveness and collaboration, collectivity, and care, and the care not only for the artwork, for the object, but the care for others, and giving space, giving voices to others. I think that's how I would interpret this whole discourse around the concept of becoming.
I think that's a really beautiful way of describing it. And the response to the show and a lot of the conversations have focused very much on the capacity of drawing to provide that attention, to fill, not to fill a space, but to accommodate the unknown, and to find, through leaving a trace or establishing a mark and an imprint on the world, a sense of being. And clearly that relates to that sensibility of becoming. And it resides in many of different forms or systems of drawing in the show. I mean, the show is incredibly diverse, and you've shown us a wonderful selection of the 71 drawings that there are in the exhibition. And, that sense of this condition sitting across the different systems, different kinds of language, different kinds of expression, but there's something very much about care, attention, touch, meditation even within this particular exhibition. And it's really rewarding. You know, we've had an amazing response to it here at Drawing Projects, and I'm very much hoping it'll look very different in the Cooper Gallery, but I'm very much hoping that it's always interesting to see it on tour, because the things that resonate all the way through, but they present themselves slightly differently in those different contexts.
Yeah.
But it was an astonishing experience, and we did have the largest ever submission that we've had, which seemed to talk to, you know, the sense of drawing being something that could be provisional, could be it could deal with the precarity that many people were feeling, or the anxiety, or simply to document what it is to be human in this particular moment in time.
Yeah.
But it was a peculiar process, wasn't it?
Yeah,
To see so much work and to work in the
and a very difficult process, in the sense of so many beautiful work and so many moving and stimulating ideas came through from the submission, and also this kind of and another idea I would like to mention is this idea of dialogues, having a conversation with oneself. That's something quite interesting, because we lived through this kind of very solitary and confined process or space, and I think a lot of reflections, but the reflections not on the basis of self-interest, but the reflections on how we could navigate through these difficulties, and then pay attention to others. That's something I found really moving and inspiring and empowering, in a sense. That's why I really loved that's Chris Bruce's work.
Yeah.
These island people, and I think that the erasure of the boundaries between humans and animals and beings and other creatures or even objects, I think that's really, really eye-opening and thought-provoking, and especially when you look at those almost kind of recognizable creatures, and with the title Island People, and how we consider our beings and being with others. I think it's really, really beautiful. And I remember Heidegger had the German philosopher, and had a really interesting idea of not instead of thinking about being in the world, but being with the world. So when I saw Chris Bruce, that piece of work, and that phrase just popped into my mind, how we navigate a way to be with the world and with the others.
I think that's a very, but it's not just poetic. I think it's exactly what the show is. It's that or many of the works in the show. If you think about the Isabel Rock drawing as well, but the Nina Chua too they're very much about marking and working with everything in order to realise an idea, to realise the content and the subject, and they're incredibly. You can feel the provisionality of working away towards a resolution within them, which is particularly, magnetic in some senses. Madeleine Lowram's performance drawing and the collaboration is also something that sits through this. And we had a really interesting drawing discussion with Ben Johnson, who's actually in the Working Drawing Award section, about collaboration, as you know, even where people are seen to have that authorial voice over their work, actually the collaboration in making and production. And we were fortunate to have Simone and Sean speaking this time last Saturday around their relationship of making and finding a framework in which to have this discourse and dialogue across time, across space, in the same space, and some now at a distance. And there's something about locating that place in the world that I think sits through quite a lot of the work this year. And it is a very, it almost feels like a meticulous show, but meticulous tends to suggest that the work is pre-planned, and it's conveying, you know, it has an idea and it's conceptualizing that and realizing it. Actually, the meticulousness is in the progression from making a mark to realizing something very complex. And I'm not saying that in the most succinct way, but there is something about the journey in all of these works which talks to that very odd time. Not all of the work's made in lockdown, but quite a lot of the work has a resonance to that suspense or a suspended period of time, which I think the islands kind of give you a sense of. But I very much like the idea of bringing that sense of being with the world to this show. We do have some questions starting to come in from our audience, and I would suggest that, you know, we are able to open up to questions as we speak. So it might be lovely if people in the audience, we have a very nice group of people with us this afternoon, would like to pop their questions into the Q&A as we're talking. But one of the things that I think is very lovely about the connection to Cooper and to bringing some of the work that you showed previously is, of course, Jade Montserrat was one of the award winners with the piece of work that she made in the Cooper Gallery in the very last iteration of Jerwood drawing. So there is this sense of drawing being at the heart of much of your programming. It may not be how people think about your programming, you know, as a character, but actually there is that sense that drawing sits there as something alongside performance that is of great interest to you. And I wondered if you wanted to say a little bit more about that.
I think to me, it's really about that, as the title of this set of notes I just shared with everybody, it is a manner. So it's always in the passing and in movement. And that's why I really enjoyed working with Jade as well on that project. That was part of a program I co-curated with the esteemed British curator Linda Morris called Two Night Stands. So we gave over our gallery space to each commissioned artist for 48 hours, and they would realize the project within 48 hours. So Jade did that durational drawing. To me, what's really moving about that project is about the process, but also the specific presence of the body and how she navigates through the space as well. But also, to me, drawing always presents the discourse, of course, discourse of language as well, what language means. If we think about representation, who has the voice, who has the voice and who could be heard as well. Yeah. But that's really expands into the collaborative ethos as well. Although Jade presented herself as this soul body, but I think when her drawing appeared bit by bit on the walls throughout these 2 days, and the space, to me, now I'm just remembering, it felt with these voices, but not only hers, but voices of many. And I think that's something I'm really interested in, this performativity and the embodiment of the subjects in drawing practice. And another example I showed in the slides, Chinese performance artist He Qingyao's piece. To me, that's absolutely a piece of beautiful drawing. And I never, even then, I never called it a piece of performance. It's always a drawing, but also this idea of, I used to talk about my curatorial practice was inspired by the idea of constellation of events, which is a concept put forward by Walter Benjamin. And this, he's a very well-known seminal book, Arcades, and which was described as a constellation of events, meaning you're juxtaposing different ideas, different positions, discourses, and voices together. And then when they are all presented on the same platform, and something will happen between them through the network, through the dialogues. So for me as a curator, my role is that platform and giving voices to others and set up this constellation of these kind of not clashes, but sparks between all these events or voices or bodies or histories. So I think it's very typical when He Chen-Yao did that action in front of Mary Kelly's film, and with all these histories behind her, around her, and also at the same time during her 4-hour performance, participatory reading events also happened. So audiences were reading a piece of text provided by Annabelle Nicholson, which was about Greenland Common, women artist activities during Greenland Common. So when the audiences started reading that shared text, He Chen-Yao paused and giving space to others. All these moments of, you know, the interactions between different artists, the different works, and also between artists and spectators, is just really beautiful and wonderful. And I think that's what's beautiful about the Trinity Buoy Wharf Drawing Prize as well. You brought so many different voices together. And then especially the selection process, to me, it was a really wonderful experience, because I have a background as an artist. I always know it's not a very easy process, you know, to work through the career process and to put your work forward for all sorts of reasons. You perhaps wouldn't always have the opportunity to be shown, to be seen, but this blind review process based on merit was really beautiful to me. Because when we did the selection, we actually didn't know anybody's backgrounds or the context, how successful they are, or even they were just early career or even students. But we make judgment based on the work, and then bring together different positions, different histories, and, you know, personal histories as well. And then now when we see all these works together in the same space, that is, to me, the constellation of events.
I think you're absolutely right, and that's a really beautiful way of describing it. And absolutely the intention is that we find things that work and have a dialogue together, as we find people who can have a dialogue together in and through drawing. So that's really very special to hear it described in that way. We have a question in, Sophia. It's from Mike Collier. And the question is to you, Sophia, as to when you were selecting, did you have a sense of where drawing is going just now? Or, and as he says, there's nothing wrong with this, was there just a complete mix of individual approaches?
I think all of us on the panel kept a very open mind. And I think that was actually made very clear right from the start when we had the first meeting, Anita, with you. The phrase you used was the extended notion of drawing. And I felt really privileged to be invited onto the panel, because my, you know, I hate being put into boxes, but usually people describe, oh, Sophia's interest in performance, or Sophia had this particular interest in critically engaged works or whatever. So I was a little bit surprised, you know, to be invited into such a specific medium. But as soon as we started our conversation, I realized that's exactly where I should be.
That's absolutely right. And actually the dialogue between you as selectors was terrific.
And also this whole idea of, you know, deliberately subverting the existing narratives, discourses, and the stereotypes around what is drawing, the definition of drawing. And I was so pleased, all these, you know, some very specific views of mine were welcomed and accommodated. in terms of what could be considered as a drawing. I think there are a lot of very, very interesting discussions around what drawings could be. And I remember we were even talking about someone submitted a letter as a drawing. That was really beautiful as well. To consider how language could be contextualized and viewed and considered as a drawing.
There were lots of extraordinary things, and as always, lots of extraordinary things that don't make their way through to the final selection, but actually remain in people's minds as something that was very pertinent and really of the moment and part of that big dialogue that everybody has. And I think the joy for me of working with the panels is actually we think very carefully about who and we would want on our panel, but we also think very carefully about having a diversity of view, but also a richness of experience and a commitment to thinking about things visually without much information. And, you know, you, just like Ian and Francis, came to this with very open minds to see what was presented to you and therefore what out of that resonated with all three of you to make it through to the show. But I know that all of you found things in the show, as everybody does, that you find of interest and still follow, even if it doesn't make all the way through. If we go back to Mike's question, did you think there was a particular character about the show this year, you know, about the work submitted rather than the show, in terms of where contemporary drawing might be? It's an open question.
Yeah, that's true. And also, to me, this whole idea for the capability of reimagining.
Yeah.
And that really came through quite strongly to me. That's why in my notes, the set of notes I presented, I constantly mentioned the word otherness. But I think that's much needed, especially within current kind of political, social conditions we're living in. And I've been talking to quite a few artists and performance artists, and Being recently did a project, and she also did a project with us on our online program. But there's one line from her really struck with me, was that imagination is a revolutionary act. I think that that's something inspired me a lot through all these artists' work submitted for this year's drawing prize. The ability to reimagine other worlds, and not just a world, but other many worlds, and also the reflections and the rethinking about political conditions around us as well. That's very important, I think, at the moment. And a lot of artists' work, you know, you don't have to be very literal stating your political position, but I think the artists actually pointed out in a direction where we could open our minds and be able to imagine. That's the first step to go to the other world.
Which is fantastic too. We have another question in, which we'll take, if I can see it. Oh, that's Mike commenting to say that's just really great to hear.
Thank you, Mike.
It's great to know you're in the audience. And I mean, I think there is a real beauty about the imagination and the capacity. I think particularly, I mean, all artists reimagine and can, you know, as you describe them, as witnesses, as bearing testament, as reinventing, reimagining. But in terms of drawing, you know, there clearly has a particular space for that, which is partly to do with the lack of preciousness. There's also this particular show, quite a lot of the work is made with quite provisional materials. You know, look, there's cardboard, there's stuff made with tape. Yeah. There are things that are very modest in this show. You know, there's the very big drawing that's made of pieces pieced together. So there's something about the capacity of making, which particularly through this field of drawing, you know, the expanded field that we do have in the show this year, seems to particularly resonate. So
also this whole idea of value,
yeah,
and the labor as well. I think that's really came through from, you know, the preciousness of artworks and how we make that judgment as well. And I think that's what exactly what I meant to say earlier on in terms of the political discourses around the artist's work and how they make their points through very creative, imaginary ways as well. You know, for example, like Nina Chow's, that's a crumbled drawn sculpture. You know, if you think about how much time she spent on drawing all these thousands, millions of lines, and then how she treated that piece of work, how she deliberately set it up to be presented. I think that's very interesting to look into. And also there's another artist use the cigarette paper to make that's quite a lot of little rollers paper and to make drawings on them as well. And another one you said use the tape, and thinking about all these materiality around us, our immediate environment, and how we express ourselves through all this mundane environment. And I think that's really interesting to see. And also there's another artist makes small drawings because her job is also a care, and then she makes those drawings on just very simple, maybe like a notebook paper in between her work shifts. I thought that piece of work was really, really moving. And then some small details in that drawing is one of the three drawings. I'm really sorry, I
it's
couldn't.
Nancy Haslam Chance.
Yeah. But the small details of the immediate surrounding of the patient she cares for, and there was a calendar on the wall, whereas in the foreground she was helping the patients to drink water. But the mark of time and the mark of memory, the memory shared by everyone, I think that's really remarkable in that piece of work.
Yeah, there's so much, isn't there, in the show? I think that those three drawings have had, we've had people quite really moved by those particular three drawings, and actually by many of the others. There's a memorialization of the fragility and the precarity of our social structures, I think, which sits somewhere deep in the heart of quite a lot of the work in the show, but particularly in those. And they're very tender. They're very, they're absolutely a document, a declaration of where we are in the way that we manage our social systems and how we care for people, and they are really beautiful drawings. So many beautiful drawings. We do have a question in which follows on from your comments about the importance of the imagination. So it's a question from Penny Hay, and the question is, the question is to ask you if you could say a little bit more about the importance of the imagination in relation to our current education system at all levels.
Right, okay, that's actually quite interesting. So at the moment, at Cooper Gallery, we're developing a 3-year research exhibition and exhibition program called the Ignorant Art School. And actually, exactly, that's the same question we're trying to explore, and how to rethink what art education is and what it's for, or who it's for. But I think in terms of reimagining that's really, I think it's absolutely vital for us to think outside of the boxes, not only in a very kind of stereotypical way how to think outside of the boxes, but rethinking a structure rather than constantly adding information into the existing structure. I think that that's perhaps something quite important, and the creativity comes in hand with this ability, the capacity to reimagine as well. But also I think decolonization is a very, very important into this dialogue and too. So, and I just want to talk a little bit more about these projects we're developing, because we're really, the reason we're calling it the Ignorant Art School is actually, it's inspired by a title of a book by a French thinker, Jacques Rancière, and this seminal book called The Ignorant Schoolmaster. And in that book, Rancière tells the story of a French school teacher in the early 19th century who developed a teaching method that had dissolved the hierarchies in the conventional pedagogical practice. So that's where the title of Ignorant Art School is from. But we also have a subtitle, which is called 5 Sit-ins Towards Creative Emancipation. I think that perhaps helps me to expand on this whole idea of reimagining what we could do. What is, the creative capacity in this task we're giving to us to reimagine art educational system, what we could do. So this project we're working on is really about to learn from artists, looking into alternative pedagogical projects throughout the history, not only from the Western pedagogical history, but also to look into the global South and what happened in other countries, and not actually completely following Western existing system. For example, we're looking into an art school set up by Indian poet Tagore in the early 50s, inspired. I think they actually, in the early 20th century, they started exactly the same time when Bauhaus first started, but how they would set up art educational system, or how they set up a curriculum, how they teach, how they work with the students, and how they erase the hierarchies between the teachers and the students. It's very interesting as well. But also there are a lot of activist movement in relation to pedagogical, alternative pedagogical experiments as well. So that's something actually we're currently researching, and we're hoping we could set up what we call a laboratory, turning Cooper Gallery into a laboratory, and to invite not only artists, but thinkers, activists, and students, and the publics, and to collectively unlearn and reimagine alternative blueprint for art education. So the whole project, again, is to set up this constellation of dialogues and erase this, who has the authorship within the system. So that's, and also, this idea of a sit-in, which is a kind of a metaphor, and we adopt from activist tactic of occupying institutional space, and as what we call it, a critical and creative attitude and praxis, and turning the art gallery into a lab for radical and decolonized pedagogies. So that's something I always feel that's what an art gallery could do, is to test out methods and ideas, and then artists could really use the creative means and as the methodology to test out those ideas, and then hopefully that could be used as a kind of influence or has an impact on social change.
I think it's such an exciting project, and I think it's so perfect to be explored absolutely in the heart of an art school. And you're absolutely right, we need to reimagine, and we're at a point in time when we need to reimagine everything. I mean, you began the project before the pandemic hit. It's really important, and you know, for someone like me, I was at the Royal College with De Francia, so to cause school was absolutely, you know, and the inheritors of that were absolutely part of that kind of teaching and that space. And I guess it was only, I mean, you know, I've been leading art schools for 30 years. I mean, that's terrifying, isn't it? But it is absolutely, it's how do we reimagine and how do we make something that's for the future and is actually based on co-creation with the future to ensure that we reimagine the world. And I think the project is so exciting because it takes from the radical curriculum development or pedagogical, I can't even say it at this point, challenges that we've seen over the 20th century, but it goes deeper and further, and it really will enable us to think about what makes, you know, an intercultural and inclusive curriculum. And that's very much where your whole philosophy is situated, isn't it? Is that it's about that societal change through the power of imagination, the power of creativity, and the power of art and design.
Also, there's a collaborative process as well.
Yeah,
that's a key. You know, that's why we adopted this title from Renzi's book and the ignorant schoolmaster. So the desire and the ability to unlearn what's already there. I think that's the key, actually. Yeah, going back to the question from the audience as well. And I remember once I was researching the original meaning of knowledge, the word knowledge. The knowledge actually already giving you the answer, the word itself is something already known. So when I was studying Erich Rogoff, the cultural theorist, is a huge influence on me. I always remembered this line from one of her seminal texts, and she said, you know, stop adding information but rethinking a structure. And I was so inspired by that line, and I felt that that's exactly what art, especially contemporary art, could do to set up all this critical structure. Yeah. So not just presenting and displaying something, but actually set up this discourse, and then embracing criticality within everything we're doing. So if through this the ignorant schoolmaster or ignorant art school project, I'm hoping we could actually bring different discourses, not only history, but also not only celebrating the history, but being critical of that history as well, in order to imagine or map out something new.
Yeah, and I think what you do is build a framework in the most beautiful way, which is open and exploratory and truly creative. And I have to say, it's what's very exciting about the Cooper Gallery at Duncan of Jordanston. It's the most amazing contribution. So I'll just continue to be excited as a dean, and overly excited as a dean, which is always good. We do have some other questions coming in, but I think that was really a beautiful answer to, or a beautiful statement and expression of the importance of a really critical framework within which you operate, and the way that you set up systems which engage different methodologies, different minds, different experiences, different qualities to create the most astonishing program. And I think, you know, you brought all of that to the selection process this year.
Thank you. Very good.
Really terrific. In terms of, there is one question in which is around materials, which which was to ask about, it's from Nicola Grelier, who's an artist in the show, to ask if you think there is a significance between the simple materials and methods such as pen paper, eraser paper, that ties them very closely to materials for written communication, more than maybe other art practices. So it's a very interesting question about the materiality of drawing in relation to writing, I think.
Yeah, that's very true. And also, I think, to me, that also speaks of the condition, almost like human condition, where we're living as well, and how we negotiate this kind of tangibility around us, and through creativity, how we express that and making point about it. So again, it's not only about representation, and to me, actually, on the selection panel, I have to be honest, I didn't make judgment based on material to start with, but only when we started thinking about all the context around the piece work, and then we would take account, at least me, myself, personally, I would take account of what's behind the use of the material. And for example, with, again, Nina Chow's work, I just thought it was quite interesting why these artists would present this piece of drawing in such a way. But also there are other works. We selected quite a few films, which is completely different medium to the conventional, what people would use for drawing. But I guess that's, it's really based on how the ideas being carried out, conveyed through the material as well, and then the discourses around the material itself. I don't know if I've answered the question.
I think you have. I mean, I think the curiosity that goes through the selection process is mediated in lots of ways, because we're using tacit knowledge and experience, and then we rethink maybe what that means in terms of its materiality. But I think a really very good response to the question. I think you certainly answered it, which is terrific. We're coming up to 5, and as you can see, it's going down, dark in Dundee and dark in Wiltshire. The show is coming to an end in Wiltshire, and we're passing the baton on to you at Cooper Gallery in the coming weeks. Yeah. It's been absolutely amazing to hear you talk about the work, talk about your work as a curator, and to talk about your new projects coming up, the projects you're working on, past projects, to hear about your experience in terms of selecting the Trinity Buoy Wharf Drawing Prize 2020. And it is an astonishing show. I'm really looking forward to the response in Dundee. I know that we have, for everyone in the audience who's been following for the month of the launch in Wiltshire, there will be more events and online events, as well as visitation in Dundee from the 13th of November to the 19th of December. And then the exhibition goes to London, to Trinity Buoy Wharf, where we had hoped to start in September. And that's where the awards will be announced. So there is a wonderful freedom in talking about all of the drawings at the moment, because we really don't know. And I think that what we have is a fantastic show of 71 drawings on tour that people can really engage with and explore. And it's been such a privilege both to work with you as a selector. It's a privilege to work with you at Duncan of Jordenston. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens next in every aspect of what you do. Can I thank everyone for joining us? We have recorded the event, and we will do a small amount of editing before they go live and are shared. But what the most important thing I'd like to do is to thank Sophia for the most fantastic drawing discussion this afternoon. And there are lots of very positive thank yous and comments coming in through the Q&A and the chat as well. But thank you so much for spending an hour with us. It's been really terrific, and look forward to the next moment we can have another drawing discussion.
Thank you very much, Anita. I just want to add, it's absolutely a pleasure and a privilege for me too, and to be on the panel alongside with Ian and Francis and yourself as well with your team. And we're really excited, the Cooper Gallery team, to welcome this super exciting exhibition coming to Scotland. And I know that many people in Scotland are looking forward to the exhibition as well. And at Cooper Gallery, we also developed a series of events around this exhibition, and they are all going to be online. And I hope many of you in the audience will be able to jump on your computer screen and to share those beautiful moments and to construct a constellation of events at Cooper Gallery as well. Thank you.
That's fantastic.